Way back in the early days of my channel when I was updating regularly, I covered Cybernoid. Kinda. This is a game that was super nostalgic for me, and I just glossed over it, and even just straight up cheated to get a completion. Barely put any time in, and called it good for the video. My big angle at the time was the fact that I had grown up and forgotten the name of this game, and had just recently rediscovered it. That's all well and good, but I really wanted to dig a little further into this game because I feel like there's still more to talk about. Cybernoid was originally created for computers like the ZX Spectrum, something that just wasn't super well known by kids in the US. And it was ported over to some other home computers, and most notably for me, the NES. At some point I played it at a friend's house before I had my own NES, or so I remember. Everywhere I'm seeing online says this game came out in December of 1989. But that's the December I thought I got my first NES, and I specifically remember playing this before I had an NES? I don't know. I was like 5 years old at the time, so who knows what I'm remembering. The original releases are something I barely glossed over in my original review, and I really think that was unfortunate because to really understand a game like Cybernoid on NES, you really should play it on its original platform. The NES had its share of slower moving PC ports for sure, but when you were going to play a game where you piloted a ship and blasted aliens, you expected something like Gradius or hell, even Galaga. Something fast-paced and exciting, not a slow-paced screen-by-screen puzzle shooter. But if you were to see it on its original platform, an 80s computer, it makes a lot more sense. This is the kind of game you'd see on a computer in the 80s. If you wanted to play this, just do a search to play Cybernoid on ZX Spectrum Online. I literally just found it before writing this review, specifically because I wanted footage, and, well, super easy, check it out. There were other ports of Cybernoid to various other PCs from the era, and the NES version seems to take most of its inspiration from the Commodore 64 version of the game, which has some pretty sweet music, I must say. Both these PC versions of the game I've played now are definitely harder than the easy mode on the NES, so it's nice the NES gave us that option. So, maybe I ought to give a rundown of this game. Cybernoid is a shooter, but it really plays almost like a platformer or a puzzle game. You can't just move in one direction and shoot everything that comes at you and expect to win. This isn't that kind of game. You must pilot your ship to avoid obstacles, and what's also interesting is the ship has to fight gravity. You press up on the control pad to engage thrusters, and if you let go of up, the ship falls to the floor. This is a thing you are constantly managing while navigating through the spaces in these levels. Sometimes you don't have a lot of room to maneuver, and fighting gravity as you are falling before squeezing your ship into an opening is imperative, or you'll blow up. You have several weapons at your disposal. In the PC games, you have bombs, seekers, bouncers, shields, and mines. In the NES version, you lose out on the mines, but you get genocide. Right. Well, it's a screen clear weapon, and it's pretty useful for these rooms that have a ton of enemies that fly at you. Bombs will help you break blocks and destroy bigger hazards. Seekers will do the same, but they automatically aim at the closest enemy. Both of these are super useful in certain situations, but sometimes they just don't seem to work. The hit detection here is a bit finicky, and sometimes the Seekers will just go after the wrong thing that you want it to. Bouncers can help break blocks and defeat enemies, but all I've found good use for it is in rooms where you need to destroy blocks above or below you. The shield will let you pass through anything for a limited time without taking damage, which really comes in handy for those rooms that are tough to navigate. And Genocide, which I mentioned earlier, is a screen nuke that helps in areas where infinitely spawning enemies come at you. Additionally, there are two pickups you can grab. The tail gun, which adds a gun that shoots behind you when you fire your laser, which honestly I don't get a lot of use out of. And the mace, which is apparently just a big metal spiked ball that swings around your ship. This thing is super useful in taking out obstacles, but again, the hit detection is a little weird. The weapons are very useful in various ways to get through the different challenges the game throws at you. In fact, if you neglect these or worry about wasting ammo, you're going to have a very difficult time getting through certain sections. What is helpful is that your ammo refills after every death, and enemies will also drop ammo for you if you're lucky. You also get 9 lives to start in the NES version, So it's actually pretty helpful to take a death if you don't have the right weapon or item for a given situation. One thing I mentioned in my original review was that if you run out of ammo and you need to get to the next screen, you are screwed and pretty much were soft locked. I was wrong. You actually have a time limit on each screen. If you stay in one screen for too long, the background will begin to flash, and if you still don't move on, your ship will blow up, giving you another chance with full ammo to figure the screen out. There is a story to this game. A group of pirates called the Bay Corps in-game, but called the Zog in the instruction manual, have found a massive supply cache of weapons and loot, and you must defeat the pirates and stop them from stealing all of it. That's it. But hey, good enough for an 80s game, that's all you really need. So this time around, I really do want to try and beat this game. Where I couldn't get through the first 9 levels without cheating help 9 years ago with my previous video, after just a few nights of practice, I'm getting to the final level fairly easily. There are only 3 levels, but you can die easily and you have no continues. The more I play this, the more I think this game is actually kind of balanced okay for a good challenge. At least on easy. Like, if I can get this far into the game on only a few nights of practice, and I really put the time into it as a kid, I probably could have beaten it at some point and graduated onto the harder difficulties. The runs are super short, and hell, I'm having a blast playing this. The hit detection on your weapons can be wonky. You can enter into a room and immediately die because that's where an enemy spawned, or just because the game seemingly wanted to kill you. You can destroy rocket turrets and the rockets will still spawn and kill you. There are so many things wrong with this game, but you kind of learn some of the wonkiness and figure out where to take risks and where to be careful due to it. And hey, there are these little rocket launcher looking things that will spawn 1-ups if you shoot them a ton. If you can find a safe place to do it, it can be worth it to refill your stock of lives, but they can be pretty tough to safely farm. At some point in the last 10 years, I picked up a box copy of this game that's actually in really good condition. The box claims that it's an international video game hit, and that it has super sound effects, and that there are 3 skill levels. I mean, it's not lying. This was a game that was a hit in Europe and has 3 difficulty settings. And super sound effects. What are they talking about? Well, that's something I also failed to mention in my original video. There are 2 sound modes in this game. When you start Cybernoid, you get the one song featured in the game. It's upbeat and very video gamey. It's got a decently long loop to it too. It's not a bad song, but you know, the one song you'll listen to while playing it. But if you pause the game and then press A, you can instead listen to the state-of-the-art realistic sound mode, where the sound of the ship drones like a low alarm and you get a laser beam sound that sounds like, well, normal NES sounding stuff. When I was a kid, I remember not knowing what the hell this was. I thought maybe this was changing gameplay somehow too, but I couldn't figure out what it was. I didn't have access to the manual back in the day. Same when I finally found this game as an adult. Until I got a box copy, I was confused as hell by this mode. But when I accidentally turned on the sound mode, it was like uncorking the forgotten nostalgia keg. This stupid droning mode that I'm listening to as I'm writing this section just brings back so many nostalgic feelings. It's pretty weird. So, if you really like Cybernoid, there actually is a sequel that was limited to those same popular in Europe computers. It never came out in the NES. It plays pretty much the same as the original, but with a few different weapons and all new maps. I didn't get very far into it, so I'm not sure what other changes there are. If there is enough interest, maybe I'll do an expanded video to look at the computer versions of this game. Should you play Cybernoid? Yeah, I definitely think if the game looks interesting, you should give it a go. Just try to give it some time to get used to the controls and how the game works before you move on. It's worth a little time put into it for what it is. I had a lot of fun playing it again for this video. I wasn't originally going to make a whole video for Cybernoid again, but man, I just felt like I had to after playing it again. I just had a real good time trying to beat this game. Thanks for watching. Later.